Broadcasting from deep in the heart of North America, 5 influential podcasters from coast to coast come together to discuss a variety of topics from around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Power Hour!
Welcome, everybody. This is Coast to Coast Power Hour. My name is Michael Glenn Moore, and I'm the host for this episode. And today we have two other podcasters with me so far. We're expecting several more to log in as the hour goes on, but I'll go around and have everybody introduce themselves and talk about their podcast and what they have going on with their life at this moment, and then we'll get into our topic. So, Mike Peacock, why don't you go ahead and start first?
Hey, thanks, Michael. Well, my name is Mike Peacock. I'm the host of Misery Point Radio. I'm based out of the Seattle area. And yeah, that's pretty much my show is about, interviews with musicians, artists, entertainers, all the way from, underground acts to established acts, filmmakers, actors, authors, musicians, all kinds of cool stuff. So I always say, epic interviews with epic artists for piles of awesomeness. That's pretty much how I describe the show. I've been doing it now for a few years and absolutely love anything behind the scenes and getting people's stories about what inspires them to keep making the creative stuff, because I think it's the creativity in the universe that kind of helps bring us all together and helps kind of move things forward, and sometimes helps people set aside their differences when they can bond over something creative and awesome.
Yeah, we are all part of the SJ Network, which stands for Stephen Joyner Network. And he is a publicist who does quite a bit of work. And for all of us, he gets us a lot of our guests. So I imagine you get talking to, the type of people you talk to, Mike, you probably deal a lot with Stephen. How's that been going for you?
Yeah, Steve is an awesome guy. He's that motherfucker, man, he's hard working. He's always nose to the grindstone. And he's a hell of a dude. And, Steve is just fantastic at hooking people up with guests and also, trying to find a right match, right? So he's not just throwing random people out and just trying to see where it lands. It's like, hey, let me pair somebody that's going to fit with your format, which I always appreciate. I've dealt with quite a few of Steve's friends and clients and have had a blast with all of them. So, yeah, props to Steve Joyner for working the magic and hooking people up and getting the word out about all the awesome people that he works with.
So if you're a podcaster and would like to get in touch with Steve, or if you're somebody who is in need of a publicist, you can find him online at s-j-network.com, s-j-network.com, and that is the website. So go ahead and go there, and there's a form that you can fill out to let Steve know that you're interested in securing his help, and he'll get back with you with his pricing packages and so forth.
And he'll change life, just saying.
Yeah, it's a good thing. So next we have Jim, the podcast Sherpa. Jim, what's up?
Hey there, Michael. How's it going?
Pretty good so far. How about you?
I'm doing good, hanging in there. It's a crisp, almost fall day up here on where I live, on the East Coast.
Well, go ahead and tell us about your podcast.
Sure. This is called Too Many Podcasts, and it's originally started out to introduce people to podcasts who might be new, and I had a lot of podcast hosts on so people can kind of get to know the hosts, and it's gradually grown, and we've had a lot of artists and writers and directors and such, and even people from all different walks of life come on the show just to shoot the breeze, and we've really expanded our scope. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
I'm going to ask you to kind of bring your camera down a little bit because we're getting your mouth cut off and it's kind of irritating. There you go. Now we can see your beautiful face. Yeah. Okay,
Sorry
so
about that.
my name is Michael Glenmore again, and I have two podcasts. One is In a City Like Yours, a true storytelling podcast where people come on and relate a story that's happened to them in their life, something that's changed them in some significant way, either good or bad. But what I'm looking for and what we have are people who can tell an engaging story about something in their life that's been major that happened to them. And the other podcast is called Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour, which is with Scott H. Silverman, who is a crisis counselor, addiction and recovery coach. And we talk about the realm of addiction and recovery. Kind of not AA, but we deal a lot with AA because that's such a big thing in addiction and recovery. Okay, so now it's time to get into our show. Today we're going to be discussing memorable movie soundtracks, and I think Mike came up with this idea, so we're going to let him go first, and we're all going to hopefully each have a different movie that we can talk about. If you want to, we could maybe talk a little bit about the podcast. About the movie without giving the title away, and Jim and I can kind of see if we can figure it out, see which movie it is.
Okay, right on.
All right, little play there.
Cool. Well, hey, so the majority of what I do in my personal life and, with my podcast and whatnot is music related. I've been a musician all my life. And I think from a very early age, I really was involved in music. My mom played music. She was a musician. My dad had just epic record collection, including a ton of soundtracks, which was cool. Vinyl, reel to reel, cassette tapes, and even, going back to, like pre-VHS and Betamax, all kinds of cool audio and video stuff around the house. And, we didn't go to movies all that often, but when we did, it was a huge treat. And every time we went to a movie, everybody was always talking about, oh, what happened in the movie, and this was cool and that was cool. But I was always left with these lingering impressions of like musical tidbits that kind of hung out in my brain. And for me, I always looked at movies as the soundtracks anyways, that they were like a character in the movie, because depending on who was doing the movie and whether or not there was a score involved, or even if it was just like a collection of music, I feel like if done properly, the music not only sets the mood for what's going on in the scene, but you can start to identify what's going to happen based off what the music is. So, I guess there's a very famous composer who I won't name yet, but I'm sure it's probably at the top of everybody's mind, but, responsible for some of the most memorable movie scores in history. And I remember this particular movie from the late 70s had so many awesome independent little snippets of music that were identified by characters. And so how can I describe this without giving it away, because it's so difficult? It's just such an obvious choice, I think, to start the ball rolling.
Yeah, I've got a good guess already.
Got a good guess already. Yeah. So, let's just say that you're kicking back, and all of a sudden there's some tense action, there's some killer lasers, and then all of a sudden get all this mist just kind of separates, and this imposing dark figure walks in to the spaceship corridor, and the music that is playing is so full of tension and so full of energy, and you just know that is a bad MF who's just going to F people up, and that just sets the tone. And every time that character pops on the screen, yeah, of that song. And so I you guys have already figured out, of course, who I'm talking about, and
of course John Williams,
the legendary John Williams. And I thought about this as I was kind of bouncing around these ideas in my head, and I hesitated to even bring up John Williams because he seems like just such the obvious choice. And, we could probably do entire podcasts about each of the movies that he's been responsible for, Star Wars, of course, Indiana Jones, Jaws, Superman, and they're all iconic though. And I every time I hear a John Williams soundtrack, I know it's him. I mean, there's clones, there's people that do it, but the very first soundtrack that I ever got, like that I bought with my own money, was the Star Wars soundtrack. and I had it on vinyl. Still have it on vinyl. The original pressing, which is great. Sadly, it's pretty butchered at this point because my young hands got a hold of it and it didn't get cared for very well. But yeah, it's really hard for me to hold a candle for anybody else to hold a candle to that soundtrack, because it's just perfect, and even like the newer Star Wars films, though, they don't hold the same. Like, you don't identify them in the same way, at least for me, because I'm old and I grew up with the originals. There's just something about them that it's like you can listen to just the music, and let's just say you heard no dialogue, right? All you heard was the music and saw the action on the screen. You could still feel what kind of a scene was going to happen without the dialogue. It's kind of like it's telling the story with the music. And so for me, I always go back to that as kind of being the catalyst for my love for soundtracks. And over the years, many others, kind of came to pass. And, from there, Last of the Mohicans, I also felt like was just a super epic soundtrack that has always kind of stuck with me. So, and many others, but if that's a good start for you guys to kind of jump from, I can stop babbling about that, because I'll talk about Star Wars until I'm freaking blue in the face and my head falls off.
That would be interesting to see. Yeah, I was going to talk about Jaws, but not really need to now because we're talking about John Williams already. Another movie director and producer that I really liked and liked his films, his soundtracks, which were not really original soundtracks. He used a lot of classical music and other things, but is Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
With things like 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Shining, which was a really good soundtrack. I thought I had that on vinyl for a long time and got lost somewhere. But he really, for me, the way he used existing music was perfect. He could hear something, or he would be making his movie and have a scene, and he knew in his head what he wanted to put with it. He knew, rather than having a movie finished and giving it to somebody to score, and then the brilliance happens then, he was kind of doing it all at one time. So, just really, really interesting. What about you, Jim?
It's funny when I think about soundtracks. I know there are some amazing composers and everything like that. There's one album that I'm thinking of that was really just a compilation of a lot of '60s music. Are we playing guess the title, or?
We can go ahead and you can go ahead.
Okay.
And say what it is.
All right. Movie. I believe it was made in the '80s. Group of, I believe they were college friends getting together. One of them had passed, and they kind of reconnect in that weekend that they get together.
I know that. It's the dead guy was played by Kevin Costner.
Yes, that's right.
I'm trying to think of the name though. It's skipping me. Do you know what it is, Mike?
Not with the one I was thinking it was going to be.
Okay, you're going to have to give us the title because I cannot think of it.
The Big Chill.
The Big Chill. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, that's from beginning to end. It's Motown, and it's just incredible choices that they made for that movie, and it really fit to. It didn't have anything directly to do with the story. I thought the story itself was okay. You had a great cast, but just like incredible music from beginning to end. Though you just like loved hearing like if it was going to be a Four Top song or a Diana Ross song or whatever it was going to be.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic soundtrack. I got to give you that. That is. And you know what? I need to go watch that movie again, because that's kind of one of those movies that every time I see it, it kind of pops on like TNT late at night, 1 a.m, and you can't. Getting the edited version with all the commercials in there, but it's still freaking cool. And it just has a soundtrack. But you're right, though. I mean, it's a collection of awesome songs that don't necessarily move the story, but you find yourself like, oh, I like that song. Oh, I like that song. That's a cool song. So yeah, that's a really cool collection of awesome stuff on that one.
I need to send out a shout out to Christopher Rudder, because I've kind of stolen his idea of doing the mystery movie or the mystery TV series. That's what he does on his podcast. So I want to make sure that when he listens to this and he doesn't say, that's what I do, you stole my idea. But so we just got a little play with that. So hopefully he's going to be on the show tonight and we can get his movies. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Mike, do you have any other movies other than John Williams that you want to bring up?
I do. And so actually there was another I guess film that I felt was very iconic that used collections of of just epic soundtracks, from like the 60s and stuff. And I was thinking Forrest Gump, which that soundtrack, I mean, I love that movie, and that's not even normally the kind of movie I go for, but I friggin' love Forrest Gump, and that soundtrack is amazing, and just so many awesome songs, all different kinds of songs. But I felt like what was done really well with that movie was that the songs really fit what was going on at the time. Like they really made an effort to say, hey, in the time when they were talking about, for instance, the civil rights movement, they used music that was appropriate for that time frame. And, and then when they were talking about, just things that were happening in general, they had like really upbeat rock and roll kind of stuff going on. But it was not a really cool mix of songs. And then I also thought what was really cool coming out of that movie was that down the road, Gary Sinise went on to form the Lieutenant Dan Band, which was awesome, and donates pretty much all the profits he makes from playing shows and recording of that project to veterans and causes for veterans and different kind of charities like Snowball Express and things like that. So I just always thought that soundtrack was awesome. I think Gary Sinise is one of the most amazing human beings on the planet, and just that was a really great soundtrack. And that also reminded me of there's one other director I think that really uses existing music as a character, and that's Martin Scorsese. Goodfellas, Casino, I mean just all of his stuff really kind of, it's again, it's the music as a character. He's using it for scene transitions. You kind of know what the energy of the scene is going to be like based off the music that's playing. And Scorsese, I think, is just a fantastic director. I don't like all of his movies. Some of them are hits, some of them are miss. He's got definitely a very stylized, kind of like Tarantino has a very stylized thing. But I think Scorsese kind of really goes after kind of, I'm trying to be kind of classy almost in the way that I present it. It's very kind of noir style, which I've always kind of appreciated about his stuff.
Well, you mentioned Steven Spielberg, two of his movies already. Close Encounter of the Third Kind, is that a John Williams soundtrack?
That's a great question. I don't know if that one is. There's this magical thing called the interwebs. I'm sure we could look it up, but I'm gonna fail the test on that one. That I don't know if that's a Williams soundtrack. Mostly because honestly, even though I've seen that movie a couple of times, I don't know why that one just never resonated with me to the point where I was gonna really watch it and then learn it and love it. But it's got a very definitely a cool score. It's a pretty light score. I mean, it doesn't have really the typical John Williams, super high cascading crescendo-y kind of stuff. It's pretty middle of the road all the way through, if I remember it. Very low key, kind of atmospheric music.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the spaceship when they were talking back and forth with the spaceship and did the dun 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 dun, that real easy play of chords there that seemed to work so well.
I just looked it up. You're right. It is John Williams.
Okay.
Boom, you win.
just got a text from Christopher, and then he'll be here in 10 minutes. So we'll have to kind of kill time until he gets here. Jim, what about you? Do you have another movie soundtrack person that you really love?
I just wanted to piggyback on something that Mike Peacock said when you're talking about Scorsese. I'm thinking about that one scene in Goodfellas. Well, I know this is kind of a spoiler if you haven't seen the movie, so sorry, it's 20 years old or whatever, when Joe Pesci gets killed and you hear the coda part from Layla, and it just fits that scene. It's so stark and empty, and you see the blood pouring and you hear the piano and the wailing guitar, and it just works. It's really weird combination of violence and rock and roll.
Really cool because that particular scene, it's funny you mentioned that because that's actually is the scene that plays out in my head every time I think of that movie and the soundtrack. And they play this song in its entirety of the beginning of that song, and it's kind of like they're going through and they're talking or showing like all the people that are basically getting whacked, because of Jimmy's getting paranoid, he's trying to separate himself and all this kind of stuff. It's perfect. I mean, because you take that song and you wouldn't think that song belongs with anything to do with a movie, right? So it's just so out of context. But when you see it together, it's got this kind of glorious, harmonious, almost ballet-like presentation. It's so smooth the way that they take this song and then just superimpose these massive images of just violent brutality, and hanging in the frickin' meat freezers, or bolts to the back of the head in the car, any number that in the dumpster, and just it's just pretty piano music and dead people, so. Definitely, I think probably one of my favorite examples of a crazy juxtaposition of beautiful music and just horrendous imagery.
Well, somebody who collaborated quite a bit with Tim Burton, I really like, is Danny Elfman.
I'm glad I got Danny Elfman, because
Yeah, he and he did the soundtrack or the theme song for The Simpsons, which of course is iconic now, and it's been around forever. And there's 5,000 episodes of The Simpsons, so you really hear it every day. But yeah, he's something. And I like him when he was with Oingo Boingo, and the movie The Forbidden Zone, which was just a crazy kind of acid trip movie that he wrote with the rest of his band members. But yeah, Danny Elfman.
There's some trivia for you with Oingo Boingo, not a name you hear every day. That's awesome. I'm a child of the 80s. I mean, I was born in the mid 70s, but the 80s were my era of I guess we'll call it audio and video absorption, where everything that I saw and everything I heard is forever packed into my head, and I'm constantly being called a child of the 80s because I refuse to let that stuff go. And I even, there's here in Seattle, there's a KISW, and they have a Dude, It's the 80s, on the radio. And it's just all kinds of glorious hair metal and, butt rock and all kinds of cool stuff. And I'm like, I like death metal and thrash metal and really evil stuff, but my guilty pleasure is listening to all this stuff from the 80s and watching all the movies from the 80s, like Weird Science and, stuff like that. So I just, Danny Elfman, I think is, I think he's, I don't want to say underrated because he's clearly appreciated in the industry, but it's something about like John Williams always being the go-to. And then there's Danny Elfman. And I kind of, at this stage, I almost kind of think it should be switched because, John Williams is he's kind of, you don't hear a lot of stuff, from him. I mean, is he still around? I don't even know. Is he still alive?
I'm not sure. I was wondering that earlier. But I agree with you that Danny Elfman is kind of the new vanguard in movie soundtracks.
Yeah, he's so prolific, and I think that he does a lot of stuff, not just movies, but TV stuff and commercials, and even music videos. So yeah, he's awesome. Composers, I think people that write scores, I don't think get the appreciation that say your contemporary musician, pop star would get. And it's really funny because a lot of pop stars, for instance, they don't even write their own music, right? It's a bunch of people putting all this stuff together. Somebody goes and performs it, and then that person is revered. Where people that write, orchestral scores or movie scores or video game scores, and you got one guy writing, music for 40 instruments, it's an immense level of talent, and knowing how to literally build a vibe, build a feeling, build a scene, and build the tension. I think is just a talent that's just way overlooked, I think, in the music industry.
Yeah, I don't have a musical bone in my body, and it's always amazed me, like what you just brought up with an orchestrated piece, that you have all those parts that somebody came up with and put them all together, and then they come out and they just sound fantastic. John Williams was excellent in that. I think he did that a lot more than a lot of the other soundtrack people, musicians. He, like you said before, with Star Wars, he kind of did characterizations with his soundtrack. So he had a piece of work that was just specifically for a character, and that character embodied that work. And it just, however he did that is amazing, because he added so much to the movie. Without the soundtrack, Star Wars should still be a good movie, but with the soundtrack that John Williams wrote, it's just that much better.
Stolle and I were talking about that actually when I was a guest on his show a few months ago. There's some stuff that you can see kind of floating around on the internet, but it's I haven't seen it in a while, but there are people out there that basically take the soundtracks out of the movies and play the movie scenes, the dialogue without the music attached to them from famous things. So listen to Star Wars, listen to some epic scenes and not have the music, right? and then it blows your mind when you see something that you've known. I've seen it a million times. I know this in like the back of my hand, and the music's not there, and you're like, I don't know what's happening. My brain can't process how this has completely changed the entire meaning of this for me. And it's really awkward and actually uncomfortable to watch these scenes without that iconic music in the background. It really messes with your head. It's something that I wouldn't wish on anybody, but you should see it just to see it, to experience, how that effect, even if you're not somebody who thinks that music affects you, when you see something without it and you want it to be there, it has an effect on you.
Well, Jim, what you got going?
Sure. I John Williams still alive, by the way. I looked that up. He's 68 actually.
Sorry, John.
And when you still talk about him, about creating things for characters, he really kind of created the music for the shark itself in Jaws, because you hear somebody go dun 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 dun. You know what that means, and when you saw that in the movie, it wasn't like you were actually seeing the shark eat somebody, but just from what you did see and you hear that music, it just kind of put that fear in you and made everybody scared to go to the beach for that summer.
Sure.
Yeah, that was very memorable. A couple of M's in that. But anyway, yeah, that was really interesting the way he did that. And like you said, it's definitely the Sharks music. Kind of one of the few films that had a beast having a soundtrack for just the beast.
Yeah, I have a question though. I want to ask you guys, Michael. I think we're a little bit older than Mike, but you think of the movie Saturday Night Fever, where it was all disco. If that was a horrible soundtrack, do you think disco would have been big, or do you think that the whole image that was presented in that movie would have made people like, well, let's do this anyway?
That came around close to the end of disco, when disco was kind of going out. I think
it was like 77.
77, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
God, what did I walk into?
Yeah, so that was really close to the time of new wave in the 80s. It took over, but yeah. So when Saturday Night Live came out, disco was kind of on its way out. We just got Christopher Stolle. He's here now, and Christopher, why don't you go ahead and say hi and tell us about your podcast?
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. I was actually finishing up the weekly show for Breaking the Fourth Wall, and we ran a little over. That's why I'm behind. I'm tardy. I'll take my demerits from Dean Michael Moore later. My show, Realm of the Mist Entertainment, Breaking the Fourth Wall. I do interviews. I do comedy. I do a little bit of everything, and that's why I don't get more than 2 hours a week of sleep. So here I am.
Well, today, Chris, we're talking about memorable movie soundtracks, and we've already discussed Star Wars and John Williams, Jaws, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and we talked about Martin Scorsese's film and Stanley Kubrick's stuff, and Oingo Boingo with Danny Elfman.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Christopher Stolle of Breaking the Fourth Wall. If you enjoy our show, you can find it on YouTube. Just look up Realm of the Mist Entertainment, or just look up Realm of the Mist Entertainment on Anchor.fm, Apple iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, or wherever quality podcasts can be heard. And also, you can find us on all the social medias. Just look for Realm of the Mist Entertainment. And I will catch you on the other side. So we're talking about symphonic soundtracks. We're not necessarily talking about, like, for sake of argument off the top of my head, like Wayne's World soundtrack with all.
No, we're talking about that too, because Stanley Kubrick used a lot of existing music in his films.
Okay.
So, and we talked about, I think Jim brought up, what was it, Jim?
The Big Chill.
The Big Chill, yeah. So we talked about that some. So what is some movies or soundtracks that really hit home with you, Chris?
Heavy metal.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I remember seeing that at the Midnight Theater. Yeah.
And that soundtrack was that was one of those soundtracks you could put on in a car and just go on a long drive and just enjoy.
Kind of pissed that I didn't say that myself. So, damn it.
That's it. I come in and I steal all the good shit, and then I leave. I'm like an illegal immigrant. I take it all and I just run back home. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Again, I just got done doing the weekly show. Forgive me, the comedy's still in me.
You're the one that has to edit this, so it's on.
Yeah, I guess that one's got to be cut out. No, but yeah, I mean, ever since the first time I saw that movie on VHS, I was in love with the soundtrack. I mean, of course, I was a hard rock, heavy metal guy to begin with, but I mean, the songs. I mean, you got Sammy Hagar on there, and I mean, screaming heavy metal, and like every song had metal references in it. I mean, it's perfect compilation and connection companion to the film itself. I don't think the film would be half of what it was without that soundtrack. I think it would just be crappy animation without the soundtrack. Not that I'm saying the movie was bad. I'm just saying I don't think it would have half the impact that it has without the soundtrack.
Well, the name in and of itself, obviously, you've got something called heavy metal. How could you have a movie like that and not have that be the bass running in the background, right? And then, think about what that did for that franchise too. I mean, the artwork was cool, but you're right, it wasn't like set your world on fire art, but it became a cult, right? It became very popular and very stylized, and then you saw movies and different generations of graphic novels and all kinds of stuff in print media. But probably you're right, had that soundtrack not been as epic as it was, the imagery itself probably wouldn't have been enough to carry that through, at least to get enough fans initially to keep that franchise going like that.
I will have to argue one point though. Like you were saying, like, yeah, I was right about the animation being kind of not like wow moment except without the soundtrack. I would agree for all of it except for the last segment, the one with the blonde haired chick with the dragon. That was some pretty good animation with or without the soundtrack, but the rest of the film, yeah.
it had different styles. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember that it didn't have like a full continuity in terms of art style. It seemed like we threw out a few different things here and there. It's really funny though, because I really liked the soundtrack for that. And honestly though, I was never a huge fan in and of itself just for the movie. It was kind of the whole experience of it with the music that I think that kind of, and I was a late comer to that franchise. Like I hadn't heard about it initially. It had been around for a long time before I got introduced to it. So.
Well, we got Christopher Rudder now. He's with us. So Christopher, why don't you go ahead and talk about your podcast so our listeners know what's up with you.
It's a party now. So I'm the host of What's Your Effing Binge. We talk to everybody about what they're currently binge watching. We do our show a little bit with a twist. We have celebrity guests come on, and I don't want to know what the name of the show is before you start talking about it. I ask everybody who, what, when, where, why, and then I try to guess at what the show is that you're talking about. And sometimes I'm right, and sometimes I'm wrong. No matter what, it doesn't matter. We just try to sit around and have a conversation like we're drinking a beer at the bar.
Yeah, we played that game at the beginning. I gave you credit. I'm sorry I stole your idea, but I just couldn't resist with we're talking about memorable movie soundtracks, and we've talked quite a bit about, most of the people, but what is your most memorable movie soundtrack?
Don't say heavy metal is taken.
I would have to say Top Gun actually has one of the most iconic soundtracks ever. There's about 6 or 7 songs that if you hear the first 5 seconds of, you know what it is and you know what it's from.
I was going to mention things that something we haven't talked about yet is musical soundtracks in movies. Things like Grease, Rocky Horror Picture Show, West Side Story, things like that. I don't know if they've all started in on Broadway or as stage productions, then gone to the movies, which I think all Grease, Rocky Horror, and West Side Story were. But movie musicals are pretty cool too, and that kind of reminds me of heavy metal as well.
You know what though? It's kind of an ass backwards thing for me, because I think some of the greatest soundtracks that have ever been done is in Disney movies. With the songs that they do, like Under the Sea and Whole New World and all that, and they're great and they're awesome. And then you buy the soundtrack, the official soundtrack, and it's not the artists that played the characters or whatever and did the voices in the songs. They always get like Beyonce to sing it, and it's terrible. It's nothing like the original. They pop it up and everything. It's horrible. Why does stuff like that annoys the hell out of me? Like the remixed E.T. album that came out in like the 80s where where they tried to make it all techno. It was horrible. Like, why do they do stuff like that?
Yeah, yet another Spielberg film. Was John Williams
John Williams score,
John
yeah.
Williams again?
I'd have to go on record besides like Top Gun being one of those soundtracks that could be, instantly you know what it is and what it's from. Most of it's a Kenny Loggins joint. But the other one besides that, I don't know if anyone's mentioned it yet, but Forrest Gump is probably one of the most iconic soundtracks ever because it encompasses such a huge time all the way back from early Elvis all the way up through, Time and doing the Rolling Stones and there's Beatles in it, and then going into the 80s and you have some more contemporary artists. That's probably one of the most well-rounded soundtracks ever, maybe.
Hell, I can make that same argument.
What's that?
I can make that same argument for the Beavis and Butthead experience.
True.
Beavis and Butthead Do America, yeah.
They have a great soundtrack, but as far as a movie that everybody has watched,
True.
It's very hard to talk to a room full of people and find somebody who hasn't seen it. Because it's it's been replayed on every network and every platform possible, and all the songs, they were all not all of them were number one hits, but they were all like top 10 hits on the charts, every single song on that album. So that's probably one of the better ones.
Well, what about the ones that are in themselves satire? Like the first one I'm thinking about, like they were actually relatively good songs, but of course they were tongue in cheek and all that. Like I'm thinking like South Park's Bigger, Badder, Uncut.
Tenacious D, Pick a Destiny.
Yeah, Tenacious D, Pick a Destiny, where the soundtracks are actually really, really well done. The songs are excellent, but they are satire. They're very tongue in cheek, blue collar comedy. Would they classify under it because of the fact of the fact that it is original art, music work, or and technically memorable? How many of us don't know Kyle's mom is a big fat bitch? But I mean, at the same time, the fact that this is so blue.
I think soundtrack is still soundtrack. If it's the music that represents the scene or the mood of everything going through the movie, and a soundtrack is soundtrack. Really, I mean, you would never rate any of the Clint Eastwood movies with Marcion as like great soundtracks because it's all musical composition, but it's still super recognizable. So, everybody knows Enzio for sure.
Yeah, I like all kinds of soundtracks. Whether or not it's orchestral stuff or whether or not it's just an anthology of licensed music. The Forrest Gump definitely I would say ranks up there as one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Mm-hmm. We covered that before you joined for sure. Dazed and Confused, kind of the same thing, right? It had this really epic soundtrack.
Yeah, great.
It was so perfect for the time of what that movie was going for. And, even just that opening sequence, just like with, sweet emotion coming here, and they're kind of introducing all the characters. And then it's like the perfect timing by the time the song is done. Boom, you've now set the stage for all the characters.
And it's great music for everybody who's watching it because you're looking at really a snapshot of like high school life. And for a lot of us, hearing those songs are very attached to whenever you first got introduced to classic rock, whatever age group you're in, or original heavy metal. There's some of those songs in there. That's a great movie that really, because we're all able to define like our musical taste while we're very young, like 14's like the perfect age.
Yeah.
And that movie represents like that time period. Also, think about Blow and American Hustle. Those two soundtracks, like Blow, the scene with ooh, Black Betty, bam, 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 and Johnny Depp is walking through the airport. It's like set to his steps, the rhythm of it. And same thing with American Hustle. Whenever you have quite a few of the scenes where they interject music instead of dialogue, and those are really well done. Those are the kind of soundtracks that appeal to me whenever it matches to the scene and the time period of the movie, or if they jump out of the time period, that it's a replacement of dialogue like they did in American Hustle and a couple times in Blow too.
I get a kick at now. I'm following with you, like you're saying, the high school feel and everything. But for me, it like when I think of soundtracks that I consistently will sit down and listen to, a lot of them that I listen to are from the '90s era, and they were acts put together with it. You know, three that come to my mind are, you know, I made a joke of it when I first came in. I made the joke of Wayne's World, but that had a phenomenal soundtrack. But the two more that come to mind that are literally iconic soundtracks would be Queen of the Damned and The Crow.
Oh, very, very big. Yeah. And what about Seven? Would that fall in the same category you're talking about? Because it was late '90s, but they represented a lot of like early and mid '90s music with Nine Inch Nails and whatnot.
I don't remember the soundtrack to Seven.
Okay, well,
really don't.
Yeah, they played a lot of Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails, but what you're talking about with The Crow, especially, man, like they had 2 or 3 songs that were.
Oh yeah, they had Nine Inch Nails, and of course the main theme song from the soundtrack, which was like the main theme song of the movie, was from The Cure. You know, so, I mean, you're talking. You got My Life with a Thrill Kill Cult. You got Jesus and the Mary Chain, Daisy Chain. You got God, so many different acts. I mean, Filter. I mean, it's quintessential '90s rock and industrial metal.
Yeah, industrial metal for sure. Yeah, that's cool. That's a good one.
What about the satire? This is Spinal Tap.
Oh, you ripped that right out of my mouth, dude. That's so awesome. You know what's great about that soundtrack is that those guys played that music. You know,
they were the real musicians who wrote and played it. Yeah,
absolutely. And so you when you think about the fact that, you know, Lenny from Lenny and Squiggy, Laverne and Shirley is this iconic.
Right.
Now, you know, it's so awesome when you see, you know, these people are accomplished musicians in their own right. Christopher Guest, of course, super awesome. Harry,
people with serious credits able to do this. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, and Spinal Tap, I think, is not only is the movie fantastic, but it's kind of like, songs were written in a humorous way that shows this progression from these super old preppy English style proper musicians.
Big bottoms, talk about mud flaps.
Talking about that kind of movie that mirrors reality, but they're spoofing it. Like Tenacious D, Pick of Destiny. Do any of you remember whenever it originally started on HBO? And if you do, how much of a poor copy is the movie of the original TV series? I think that's because to me it's a horrible ripoff watching Tenacious D, the TV series in the early 2000s.
I think it's all a ripoff compared to their actual just albums themselves. I mean, you know, the songs have always been awesome, whether it's TV or movie, but you know, you can just kick back on a radio and listen to Tenacious D and get the joke. You don't need visual.
Yeah, but with the TV show, you were able to see the original skit on how they came up with the greatest song there ever was, or any of the other ones. All of them revolve around these comedy skits, and you're able to see Jack Black back before he was aware of cameras and his spot and all that other shit. And then whenever it's just too much of a. It's not a sellout because they're introducing it to a new crowd. It's smart, but at the same time, if you watch the original part of it, the movie itself doesn't hold up to the TV series in my
mind. But I got to defend the movie for one reason. If it wasn't for the movie, we would not be able to sit down and enjoy the song Kickapoo and having fucking Meatloaf playing the Christian father. Okay.
That's great camera. That's for sure. That's great filming. Definitely.
I think speaking of Jack Black, I mean, you know, School of Rock was a fun little movie that he did.
It had a great soundtrack, didn't it? Yeah.
It did. But the cool thing about it, as we were talking about, was, you know, the music was the subject of the movie, right? He's teaching these kids his music, but he's iconic music. So it's not just that it's there for the movie viewer to enjoy in the background. It is a character. The movie music
Mhm.
is part of the movie in that sense, which is really cool. And it kind of reminds me of, like, old Tarantino flicks like Reservoir Dogs, for instance,
Yeah.
where they're taking like the soundtrack, you're listening to the soundtrack through the radio of the character,
Right.
listening to that song as something's happening. And then,
Yeah.
fiction, they're turning on, inside, Mia's house, right? She flips on the reel to reel. You're listening to the music as they're listening to the music.
It's almost like kind of, pardon this, it's a pun, but it's almost like they're allowing the music to break the fourth wall to become that interaction with the viewer, because it's a living part of the dynamic. It's really interesting whenever people are able to pull that off and make a good storytelling. That's for sure.
Well, let me pose a question.
For instance, Stolle, you're talking about Wayne's World and, a movie breaking the fourth wall, right? They're playing, Bohemian Rhapsody in the Gremlin or the Pacer as they're driving down the road, right? That iconic scene where they've written that entire scene around them performing that song in the car. That's perfect movie making right there. It's epic.
Oh, absolutely, and all the dream sequence in it, like Foxy Lady for Garth dancing up to the woman, and Dreamweaver every time Wayne was looking at Tita Carrere up on stage while she's singing fucking.
Dreamweaver. She goes into slow motion, the glitter sparkles and shit. Yeah, man, it's fucking great. Yeah.
But how about when a soundtrack surpasses the movie? Like, the one thing that comes to my mind right off the bat when I think of a great soundtrack but a shit movie was like Lost Highway.
So that's David Lynch, right?
David Lynch is fantastic. Yeah.
Crossroads, I think, falls into that category as well.
I have a love-hate relationship with David Lynch. I want to love his movies because I always like his concepts. I just don't. But yeah, you're right. That soundtrack was great. It was eerie. It was weird.
Oh, it was so atmospheric. It's a shame that it was wasted on a movie like Lost Highway, which I know some people dug, but it wasn't good.
That was Rammstein a lot, wasn't it? In Lost Highway, Rammstein?
There was Manson, there was Nine Inch Nails, there was it was a lot of industrial bands.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem to fit. It's not like we were talking about, with Goodfellas, where, you have the weird thing about like this beautiful piano music and this violent imagery. With Lost Highway, you just had weird avant-garde film stuff and weird lighting and weird backgrounds, and then music that just didn't fit. I had a hard time.
It was basing by the title and the subject matter. It was almost like, like Lost Highway, that evokes a country song. And then you get blasted by Nine Inch Nails during one of the, it kind of really throws you off. And you're right. It's music that doesn't belong with the film, but it was great music for sure.
Yeah, it was a good sound. You're right. If you just bought the soundtrack to listen to in your car, you'd be like, this is badass.
Yeah,
you hit the nail right on the head though about good music that's in a film that it doesn't belong. I'm not calling this film bad because I know I'll get shot by every chick on the planet, but to me the music does not fit because it's all 80s in a story that's in the 1950s. The soundtrack's phenomenal, but it doesn't belong on the film itself. Dirty Dancing.
Well, Dirty Dancing, because they were able to bring in the music that they were able to dance to, making it a period piece that's frozen in time, it does make sense. It does translate to what they're doing on screen, but the music, I think, is far better than the movie, but that's just because I'm not into chick flicks. So, I know it's an all-time great, but at the same time, the music is really good, and I think it's far better than the movie was. I think the movie's seriously overrated anyway.
I agree, but the film was supposed to take place in the 1950s. I think they should have used 50s music in it, not modern acts of the time that were popular for the 80s when the film came out. Because to me, not that I'm a big chick flick fan to begin with, but to me, that was one of the major things that took me out of the film. Because every time I'm watching them do the greaser daddy-o thing and, the good girl in the poodle skirt and everything else, and then all of a sudden the song comes on and it's like fucking Madonna, it completely took me out of the suspension of disbelief. You know what I mean?
And I think that was a little bit of the director's pretentiousness of showing how frozen in time this place was. because it had been the same for, generations. You look at, Baby's dad. He played there as a kid with his parents and whatnot, Nobody puts Baby in a corner. Well, I mean, they didn't really travel through time either, So I think that was a little bit of the directorial interpretation of that. But I mean, the music is definitely far better than the movie.
Yeah, playing on the theme of movies with soundtracks that don't really go is Sophie Coppola's Marie Antoinette, where she, it's a period piece, but all the music is modern rock and roll. And when I watched that, it just it took away from the film. It distracted me.
Which show again?
Marie Antoinette.
Oh, okay.
It's a while back, but I think it was Sophie's second film or whatever. But and she used modern music, and it just didn't fit for me.
You know what? The first thing that comes to mind when you mentioned that was the modernization of Romeo and Juliet with fucking
Baz Luhrmann.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah. Where they try to modern gangsternize the Romeo and Juliet story, and oh god.
Well, I actually like that one for some reason. That kind of hit a mark for me, but because they were trying to modernize it. That was part of it. But with Marie Antoinette, she was keeping everything period, and with the music, which was modern, and the Romeo and Juliet, the period is modern and the music is modern.
But the dialogue is still old century English.
Right.
It's weird whenever directors or the writers of something like that put things in those directions. You're using Shakespearean language, but you're using a semi-modern setting and modern music, and you're trying to blend all of those things. It's a movie has to be done in a really particular, super good way to be able to pull something like that off. It can come across as being super sloppy if you try to blend those time periods and settings together, and it can really come off being really poor or amateurish, I guess.
But there is times that it works. And one that comes to mind, and again, I may be a fanboy of it. I know Mike's gonna laugh when I say it, but I'm thinking Young Guns 2. Bon Jovi did the whole fucking soundtrack, and I mean, it was rock and roll with a country.
That was at the time period when it was right to have Bon Jovi do a movie, for sure.
But but you could listen to it on the movie, and it did not detract from the film at all.
No, it fit. Yeah.
I'm gonna give you that one, Stolle.
What's that?
I'll give you that one.
I mean, I don't think Blaze of Glory would fit on Tombstone, but it worked for Young Guns too. Yeah,
it was the right movie with the right kind of the way they shot it and the actors they had involved in it, and then it was a perfect vehicle for Bon Jovi to be in a movie without actually being on screen.
Yeah,
with Emilio Estevez and everybody else, it was all a good concept for sure. Hollywood sold that one well.
Look, I've only seen 2 films with Bon Jovi actually acting in it. U-571, and he was actually pretty good in U-571. It was a pretty sad thing that he got hit in the face and killed with a Nazi shield off the conning tower of the boat, and then Vampires Los Muertos, which I threw up on my mouth a little just talking about it.
I think maybe the residue of Vampires kind of affected me on the other movie, because I was like, yeah, this is dumpster juice, but whatever.
Well, Jim, do you want to jump in here? You've been kind of quiet.
I'm enjoying this back and forth right now. It's good. I'm good.
I'm sorry, Jim. You can tell us to shut the hell up anytime.
Yeah. I'll mute myself, man. I'm sorry, bro.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So, I wanted to jump back in then with, another kind of a score, if you will. Speaking of, kind of the gangster movies and whatnot, the main theme from The Godfather, I always thought was a fantastic,
Yeah.
Of course, you haven't lived until you hear Slash do it on his guitar.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But it's cool because they took that theme throughout that movie, but did it 20 different ways, right? Different
Right.
instruments, different speeds, different,
They changed the beat, they changed the rhythm. Yeah, exactly.
but it was always it's like it's haunting, right? And it sticks with you, and it's just kind of one of those movies I always thought like never really got a recognition for the soundtrack, because in and of itself it wasn't really that memorable, but that main theme, I think, still
If people hear it, they recognize the song for sure. They may not know where it came from, but the acting overcame it.
yeah, and
That's a couple of him, right?
not only does it, people maybe not recognize it, by name, but there's bands that have like covered it, that have done like, here's a metal version of this. I've seen, hip hop artists incorporated into their songs, and top 40 pop stuff, international stuff. I just think that particular piece of music has gone through so many different iterations over the years, and it's not even a long piece of music. It's only a minute. I mean, and then it gets on and stuff like that. But I just that's always one of those ones that always stuck with me, that I thought was just a really cool, over black boom, thing all up. You hear it, you're like, oh yeah, it's coming.
Yeah.
There's some holiday film soundtracks that I think would stand the test of time too. It's like one of those things that like
Home Alone.
Well, not just Home Alone. I was actually thinking older. I was one of the first ones that came to my mind was literally White Christmas, Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye, and you got the sisters, Clooney's mom, Rosemary, I think it was, or whatever. I mean, there's some great songs in there. Some of them are not even Christmassy, like they don't you call it dance, they call it choreography, or whatever. There's some great tunes in there. It's older, but it's absolutely fitting. And of course, you've got White Christmas with Bing Crosby singing it, which is as iconic as it can be. And
it's still listed in the top 10 of most played, and it's most played and most requested songs of all time, I think, is the category that it's still in the top 10 of.
Oh yeah, and then another one that I was thinking which would be more modernized, if anybody remembers, was Bill Murray's movie Scrooged.
That had a great soundtrack. That from beginning to end, it covered a lot of different areas and eras. That was a good soundtrack.
Of course, the most iconic of the songs that came out of that was Al Green and Annie Lennox. Put a little love in your heart. Yeah.
So, talking about the Godfather theme that was sampled so many different ways, it's a difference of like 13 or 14 years, kind of a common theme. But Scarface also actually has a weird score that goes through it. There's a couple of musical samples that go in there, but for the most part, they use kind of that eerie kind of thing going through. There's quite a few scenes where they didn't actually have produced music, where it was just mostly an orchestrated score, I guess is the right way to put it, where if someone plays a few bars of the scene where Tony is about to dump his face into the cocaine, that weird little sound that they have going on back there, that goes on throughout that whole movie, and it's not actual music, it's just kind of like noise that's in tune, I guess, kind of like what they did in Godfather. But I think Godfather was more of an orchestrated piece.
Well, if we're going to go into just a single piece that defines the music for the whole entire franchise, soundtrack, whatever, leave it to the Philadelphian to point this one out. Rocky.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, of course, you got Eye of the Tiger from Survivor, but the actual Rocky score, I mean, there ain't
Manzoni, dude.
Oh, that song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Manzoni was the shit. He won like 12 Emmys, and it was on Johnny Carson maybe 10 times or more, maybe. But yeah, man, that's like one of the most recognizable on the first note kind of songs.
Mm-hmm.
That's the shit.
And you get an image with it. I mean, you always picture Rocky running up the stairs.
Running up the steps. Yeah.
And I think for a film score that uses orchestra, I think that's the most important part. Like, I know you guys talked about it earlier. I wasn't here for it. But when I think Star Wars, I can literally put on a Star Wars soundtrack, close my eyes, and I see the film in the scenes listening to the music. Like, when the music notes hit, I know where it is in the film.
And it's not just Emperor's March. If you're a real fan of the movies, knowing the whole soundtrack, like whenever Luke Skywalker and Darth fight in the freezing pit in Empire Strikes Back, there's a trivia game, and they asked, we played on teams, me and my co-host, we played on teams, how many sword strikes were there during this scene, and they played just the first 5 seconds of the song from that scene, and we went through it, and it was like, the answer was 7. And it took both of us about 15 seconds to go through it because we were imagining the music along with the scene. It's so attachable. It really is.
But that's the beauty. That's the beauty of fucking John Williams anyway, because you could do the exact same thing with Indiana Jones. You could do the exact same thing with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You could do the exact same thing with Jaws. Like, the man had a way of making visuals with music. Yeah. For lack of a better term, he made visuals.
He drove the scenes for sure. Yeah. Or the way they edited it. You know, I think that was just as important as his piece, but he was able to visualize the whole scene with the music and make it go together, for sure.
I was just remembering the Who's Tommy or Pink Floyd's The Wall. Those are both two films that I think really worked out.
The only thing I would argue with Pink Floyd, The Wall, is The Wall was an album 3 years before the movie.
And they conceptualized it. It became one of the first concept albums because of the movie. I think another one that really attaches itself well with raw footage is Song Remains the Same. Maybe it's overplayed a little bit, but the way they showed that set from, this is a 1975 concert before some classics, and definitely after some have been overplayed, but that's just a lot of great raw footage, the way they cut it together with the music, and you can't argue with Led Zeppelin anyways, but still, if we're talking about that kind of album.
Yeah, I'm a kid of the 70s, so those are right up my alley.
Well, see, that's why I'll leave it to the judges, to give the overall marks to it. But that's why I didn't think to bring up Pink Floyd The Wall, because I know the album released in 1979 and then the film came out in 1982. Essentially, they made the film for the album as opposed to
that's the concept
they made for the film.
That's
the same thing with Tommy.
The idea of concept albums, also Queensryche, their two albums, Jet City Woman and Operation Mindcrime, those were put together kind of like as a tribute to Pink Floyd with the whole concept album. If you watch all of their videos in a row, it actually puts together a movie with a common theme.
You brought something up, and I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes, but I'm going to throw myself out there in the universe as probably one of the most resident experts in Queensryche, in the fact that at one point I had an option to write a movie based off the Operation Mindcrime soundtrack.
Yeah.
When the band split up, that all took a shit. It just
whenever Joffrey and was it the guitarist or the drummer who had the big disruption?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of hostility in that band going back many years. The catalyst.
My wife is probably like one of their greatest fans, period, because she knows everything about them, and it a great band and a tragic kind of a split up, and they've reunited a couple times, and it's just not ever
the new Queensryche is straight up legit. Todd LaTorre is amazing. Give it a shot. So maybe down the road, we can talk about that album in some point.
Yeah.
Concept albums would be a great topic to revisit.
Yeah, concept is a really wide variety, I guess.
Yeah, but to be fair, you got about as much chance of getting original lineup Queensryche together as you do ever getting.
Well, they did it on. I don't know if they did it on this last album. I don't know if they did it on this last album that he's talking about, but I
don't think Jeff was on it, was he?
One before that, huh?
I don't think Jeff was on the new album, was he?
Jeff hasn't been on an album for
Right.
3 albums at this point.
Yeah. That's what I mean. You'll never get Jeff to You have about as much chance of getting Jeff to rejoin Queensryche as we do getting Roger Waters back in Pink Floyd permanently, not just for one. Or
Well,
Don
it's sad
Dokken and
because-
Lynch Mob re-performing, to become Dokken.
It's really sad, knowing that that was part of the whole sound that made the group go. That that focal point is not ever going to be there again. It's
And
really sad.
when you have litigation involved, and now
Yeah.
they, on a legal term standpoint, certain members own certain product, so who has the right to play these songs is now decided by court. So getting people back together would encompass having to kind of reevaluate legal standings on
breaking litigation or whatever, that's really fun.
I gotta as a songwriter, I gotta imagine there's some there's some personal feelings involved too. Like when you say a court is involved. Let's say for the sake of argument, all 5 of us were in a band and we split up, and I was the primary songwriter, but you guys won the rights to songs that I wrote. Yeah, I would take some offense to that.
That's black and white with them. Some of it has to do with the actual guitar riffs, the arrangement on things, the way the concept of the 2 concept albums. Like all of that stuff is up to the litigation. Like there's a whole lot of intellectual property they're arguing over. It's not as black and white as writing the song or not.
No, I get that, but what I'm saying is I could definitely see some hard feelings being involved with it too, not just legality.
Yeah, and that's the fucked up thing. And there's a really blurred line with all of them because they're all claiming ownership of each thing.
Yeah,
really fucked up.
If Michael Jackson can buy the entire Beatles catalog,
true,
right?
Hey, guess what? I own all your stuff now.
Look, as a songwriter. As a songwriter, if I was the Beatles, I would be pissed if Michael Jackson bought all my shit because, if I was as a songwriter, I think I would be most accepting of the fact if Weird Al bought my shit.
It's
Paul
pretty
McCartney.
easy to do. It's pretty easy to do whenever Ringo Starr doesn't give a shit. Paul McCartney isn't the real Paul McCartney, and John Lennon's dead.
So it's George Martin.
Well, Paul McCartney approached Michael Jackson to go in with him to help buy the catalog, and Michael Jackson went behind Paul McCartney's back and bid out.
He did scoop him on it. He definitely did. Yeah.
And Pete Best still got screwed.
But we digress. Nice.
Well, gang, we've been an hour. You want to go ahead and call it a night, or?
Sure, we can
going?
go.
Yeah, I'm cool.
Okay. Everybody say bye.
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 Cheerio.
We already talked about the show, so yeah.
Peace
Have a
out.
good week, guys.
Okay, I'm going to end it. Bye-bye.
See ya.